A 12-year-old girl answers a blocked call at midnight, and the voice on the other end calmly whispers her full name before describing the exact socks she's wearing, even though the blinds are closed and every door is locked. The scene cuts in flashes. A bathroom door slowly swinging open on its own, a wet footprint on a dry bath mat, an empty gaming chair turning toward a half-open bedroom door, heavy footsteps crossing a split-level house that security footage swears no one entered, 3 deliberate knocks thudding from beneath a child's bed on solid wood above bare concrete, and a payphone screen glowing in the rain as a blocked number dials again. These are 5 terrifying true childhood Home Alone stories where the kids were supposed to be safe, where the house was supposed to be empty. But something else was inside with them. Story 1. The Man Behind the Bathroom Door. The doorknob turned like a slow decision being made, and Liam stood frozen in the hallway with his back against the wallpaper, listening to something on the other side breathe, wet, close, patient, like it had been waiting for him to notice. His fingers were locked around the cordless phone so hard they hurt, but he couldn't lift it to his ear because he was afraid the smallest movement would make the sound stop. And if the sound stopped, it meant whoever was inside had moved closer. But what happened next changed everything. The bathroom light snapped on through the crack beneath the door, and he saw it, water seeping out in a thin line across the tile, creeping toward his socks. 2 hours earlier, it had been the most normal kind of night. His parents left after dinner for a meeting at school, the kind they promised would be quick, and Liam was proud they trusted him. He was 10, old enough to microwave popcorn, old enough to lock the door, old enough to pretend the quiet didn't bother him. He watched cartoons with the volume a little too loud, because silence in that house had a way of making small noises feel intentional. The refrigerator clicked. The air vent sighed. He told himself those were just house sounds, nothing more, until he heard the shower curtain ring slide, soft and metallic, like someone dragging a finger down each one. He muted the TV. The noise didn't repeat. Liam stared at the dark hallway, waiting for his own nerves to settle down, then unmuted the show and tried to laugh at himself. 30 seconds later, the bathroom light turned on. Not a flicker, an actual click like a hand had reached for the switch. Liam sat up, the popcorn bowl going cold in his lap, and tried to remember if he'd left it on earlier. He hadn't. He told himself it was a faulty switch, an old house problem, the kind adults shrugged at. Still, he stood there, debating the walk down the hallway like the hallway had teeth. When he finally went, he moved slowly, one step, then another, because the floorboards always squeaked in the same places and he didn't want to hear them. The bathroom door was open. The light was on. Everything inside looked normal. Sink, mirror, towel hanging crooked on the rack. He leaned in, scanned the tub. The shower curtain was closed. Liam swallowed and reached for it with 2 fingers, pulling it back just enough to see bottles lined up in the corner. Empty tub, no feet, nothing. He let out a shaky breath that almost sounded like a laugh, snapped the light off, and walked away fast like he hadn't been scared at all. He made it back to the couch and forced his eyes on the TV. Then he heard it, tap, 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 coming from the bathroom tile, measured and careful. It wasn't dripping, it wasn't random, it sounded like a wet fingertip touching the floor. Liam paused the show again. The tapping stopped instantly, like it had been listening for his reaction. He waited, holding his breath until his chest ached. Nothing. Then, as if it wanted to prove it could, the bathroom light clicked on again. Liam didn't call out this time. He stood up so quietly the couch cushions didn't sigh, and he moved toward the hallway like he was approaching an animal that might bolt or bite. Halfway there, the tapping returned, faster now, closer to the doorway. He stopped. The tapping stopped. He took one more step. The tapping started again. That was when he understood it wasn't a plumbing issue or a loose vent or his imagination. Something was matching him. Something was responding. He backed up and snatched the cordless phone from the kitchen counter, hands shaking so hard he nearly dropped it. He hit his mom's number without looking. It rang once, twice. On the third ring, he heard a sound behind him in the hallway. Barely a sound at all, more like the weight of someone shifting. Liam turned his head and saw the bathroom light spill across the floor. The door, which he was sure he'd left open, was now mostly closed, leaving only a narrow, dark crack. From inside that crack came the faintest exhale, humid and human. His mom answered, cheerful at first, and Liam couldn't form words. He just listened to that breathing and held the phone away from his face so it wouldn't pick up the tremor in his hands. His mom asked what was wrong, and he finally whispered, "Someone's in the bathroom." She started to say his name the way parents do when they think you're joking, but he cut her off, voice breaking, telling her about the tapping and the light and the curtain. He expected her to argue. Instead, her tone changed mid-sentence, like she'd suddenly pictured the same hallway. She told him to leave the house. Now. Go to the neighbor's porch. Don't hang up. The only way to the front door was past the bathroom. Liam stared at the hallway and realized the house had become a narrow tunnel with one exit. He stepped forward, phone pressed to his ear, his mom repeating instructions in a low, urgent voice. The bathroom light turned off. That should have made him feel better, but it didn't, because darkness meant whatever was inside didn't need light anymore. He crept past, eyes locked on the door. The crack widened by a fraction, silent and smooth, as if someone on the other side had placed 2 fingertips against it and pushed. Liam smelled it then, soap and warm water, like someone had just stepped out of a shower. He didn't look back. He didn't run yet. He walked fast and careful, as if sudden movement would trigger something. And when he reached the front door, the floorboard beneath him squeaked loud enough to feel like a scream. From behind him came a new sound, a slow, wet step on tile. One, then another. Liam yanked the front door open and ran so hard the cold air burned his throat. He didn't stop until he reached the neighbor's porch light, pounding the bell with both hands while his mom's voice shouted through the phone. The neighbor opened the door, took one look at Liam's face and pulled him inside. The police arrived before his parents did. They searched every room, every closet, every corner of the garage, announcing themselves like noise could scare a person out of hiding. Liam watched from across the street as flashlights moved through his living room windows. 10 minutes later, an officer came out and told his parents there was no one in the house, no signs of forced entry, no broken locks, no open windows. His mom looked relieved for half a second, until another officer walked out holding the bath mat like it was evidence. In the center of it was a damp footprint, large, clearly defined, not even close to Liam's shoe size. And the shower curtain, which Liam swore he'd left pulled back when he checked, was drawn almost completely shut, with the bottom edge folded outward, like someone inside had quietly lifted it to watch feet moving past the doorway. Liam didn't sleep at home for a week. When he finally did, he kept the bathroom door wide open, light on, hallway lit like a runway. Months later, on a night he thought he'd forgotten it, he overheard his parents talking in the kitchen in voices they didn't know he could hear. His dad said the previous owners had called the police years ago because someone broke in and hid in the bathroom while the family ate dinner. His mom said the report described wet footprints, even though no one had been showering. Liam lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the sound of that tapping. Tap, 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 wondering if it had been a person waiting in the dark or something that wore a person's habits like a costume. And even now, older, taller, living in a different place, he still can't stand the sound of a bathroom light clicking on in an empty house, because part of him expects the doorknob to turn again, slow and certain like it's finishing a decision it started years ago. Story 2. The caller who knew my name. The pantry door was inches from Maya's face, and she didn't dare let it touch the frame because even that tiny click felt loud enough to give her away. The cordless phone was dead in her hand, screen black, battery gone at the worst possible second. And out in the kitchen the landline rang again, slow and patient, like whoever was calling already knew she couldn't stop it. Then her mother's voice wasn't the one that came through the silence. It was a man's voice, calm and close, drifting from the speaker of the ringing phone even before she answered it, as if the house itself had picked up. "Maya, if you walk to the window right now, I'll wave at you." But what happened next changed everything, because as he said it, the blinds in the living room rustled, not from wind, not from air conditioning, but like someone's fingers had brushed them from the inside. Earlier that night, Maya had been almost excited to be home alone. She was 13 and tired of being treated like a little kid, and when her mom left for the overnight shift at the nursing home, she gave Maya the same rules she always gave. Lock the deadbolt, don't open the door, keep the lights on in the living room, and call if anything feels wrong. Maya promised, rolled her eyes the moment the car pulled away, and set up her little grown-up routine. Microwave noodles, TV low, phone on the coffee table like a safety charm. The apartment complex around her was quiet but not empty. She could hear distant footsteps in the hallway sometimes, a neighbor's muffled laughter through the walls. It felt normal, safe enough. At 12:14 a.m., the landline rang. It was the old kind of ring, metallic, sharp, too loud in the dark. Maya stared at it, annoyed more than scared, thinking it was her mom checking in. She picked up without thinking and said, "Hello?" Silence, then a whisper, soft as breath on glass. Maya Elise Carter. Her full name, middle name included, the way her mom said it when she was in trouble. The hair on Maya's arms rose so fast it felt like a physical reaction, like static. She swallowed and asked who it was, trying to sound bored. The voice stayed calm. "Don't pretend you don't know. You're alone tonight." Maya laughed, one short, fake laugh, because laughing makes fear feel stupid. "Okay," she said, Who is this?" The voice didn't answer the question. It described her. "You're on the couch. You pulled one sock down because it's itchy. The other one has the cartoon face on the ankle." Maya's stomach dropped. She looked down without meaning to, and her breath caught because it was true. The socks were her favorite, soft, ridiculous, childish, and she'd put them on without thinking. The blinds were closed. The living room light was on. The front door was locked. Still, someone knew. She hung up hard enough that the phone rattled on its base. Her hands shook as she called her friend Kira on her flip phone, whispering like she didn't want the walls to overhear. Kira answered sleepy and annoyed, swore it wasn't her, swore nobody at school knew Maya's middle name, told her she was being paranoid. Maya wanted to believe it. She even managed to laugh again, weaker this time, telling herself the caller was some creep dialing random numbers, fishing for a reaction. Kira stayed on the line for a minute longer, then yawned and said she had to sleep. Maya didn't beg her to stay. She didn't want to sound scared. 5 minutes later, the landline rang again. Maya stared at it, frozen, and tried to let it ring out. It rang and rang until the sound felt like it was vibrating inside her teeth. Finally, she picked up, not to talk, just to make it stop. The same voice was waiting, like it had never left. "Why did you hang up on me, Maya?" he asked gently, almost disappointed. Maya didn't answer. She listened. In the background of the call, there was a faint sound. Rain, maybe, or traffic. Something outdoors that didn't match the quiet hallway outside her apartment. Then the voice shifted, still calm, but now threaded with certainty. "Don't lock your bedroom door," he said. "I can't get in that way." Her heart slammed hard enough to make her dizzy. She hadn't locked her bedroom door yet. She hadn't moved from the couch. She forced her voice to work. "I'm calling the police," she said, and hated how small it sounded. The man chuckled, not loud, not mocking, just amused. "With what phone?" he asked. Maya's eyes snapped to her flip phone on the table. It was there. She grabbed it and stood up, keeping the landline pressed to her ear because she didn't want him to hear the click of the handset returning to the cradle. She backed toward the kitchen, trying to stay quiet, trying to move like a shadow. The man spoke again, and his next words turned her blood cold. "Don't bother checking the knife block," he said. "It's already missing one." Maya stopped breathing. The knife block sat on the counter by the stove. She didn't want to look at it because looking would make it real. But she looked anyway. One empty slot gaped back at her, darker than the others like a missing tooth. Maya's knees buckled and she caught herself against the fridge. The landline cord hummed faintly as she moved. "You see it," the man said softly, pleased, as if he could watch her reaction through the walls. "Good. That means you're listening." Maya ran. Not to the front door, because the front door meant the hallway, and the hallway meant being seen, but to the pantry. It was a cramped closet full of cereal boxes and cleaning supplies, a space that smelled like cardboard and lemon disinfectant. She squeezed inside and pulled the door until it was nearly closed, leaving a thin crack for air. She dialed 911 on her flip phone with shaking fingers, thumbs slipping off the buttons. The screen flashed 1% battery. She hit call. The phone died instantly. She stared at the black screen as if her willpower could restart it. Somewhere in the kitchen, the landline rang again, as if the house itself was mocking her. Ring, ring, ring. Maya pressed both hands over her mouth to keep from making any sound. The ringing stopped. For a moment there was nothing, no footsteps, no voices, just her own heartbeat thudding in her ears. Then the landline rang again, and this time, before she could decide whether to answer, the man's voice drifted out of it, low and intimate, like he was standing in the kitchen speaking into the receiver with his mouth close to the microphone. "If you walk out of that pantry," he said, "and go to the living room window and pull up the blind, I'll wave at you from where I am." Maya's eyes filled so fast she couldn't see. Her nails dug into her palms. She stayed perfectly still, barely breathing, trying to disappear into stacked paper towels and boxed pasta. The voice waited, unhurried. Then it added, gentle as advice, "Don't make me come closer to prove it." Time did something strange after that. Minutes stretched like hours. Maya stayed crouched in the pantry until her legs cramped and her feet went numb. Eventually, exhaustion pulled her under in short, terrified dozes, waking every time the building creaked or a neighbor's door shut somewhere down the hall. When morning light finally seeped under the pantry door, she realized she'd been crying in silence for so long her face ached. Her mom's keys rattled in the lock. The front door opened. "Maya!" her mom called, voice already tight with worry. Maya tried to answer but only managed a broken sound. Her mom found her in the pantry and dropped to her knees, pulling her out like she'd been trapped. Maya could barely speak. She only repeated, "Someone called, someone knew, someone had the knife." They searched the apartment together. The knife block still had an empty slot, but the knife wasn't on the counter or in the sink. It was on the floor, placed carefully right outside Maya's bedroom door, aligned with the threshold like a warning line. Her mom's face drained of color. She called the police. Officers came, checked the windows, checked the deadbolt, checked the balcony door. No sign of forced entry. No broken locks, no splintered frame. One officer suggested maybe Maya had left the knife out herself and forgot. Maya stared at him like he'd insulted her. Then her mom checked the landline's call log. The calls came from a payphone 2 blocks away. That didn't make it better. That made it worse. because it meant the caller was close enough to walk there, close enough to watch the building, close enough to come back if he wanted. Maya didn't tell her mom about the blinds rustling because she couldn't explain it without sounding insane. She didn't tell her mom about the way the voice had sounded like it was in the kitchen because she couldn't bear to hear someone doubt her. Months passed. The knife was replaced. The locks were changed. Maya started sleeping with a chair wedged under her doorknob. She started keeping the TV on low at night just to fill the silence. She started answering unknown numbers with her heart already racing because part of her expected that calm whisper to return. And years later, after she'd moved, after she'd grown, after she'd told herself it was over, her phone lit up one evening with a blocked call. She didn't answer. She let it ring until it stopped. Then, as if the caller wanted her to know he still could, a voicemail appeared with no number attached. The message was only 1 second long. A soft inhale, and a whisper of her old name said perfectly, like it had never left his mouth. Story 3. The Thing in My Brother's Room. The bedroom door bucked against Eli's shoulder like something on the other side was testing how much a 9-year-old could hold back. And the doorknob rattled so hard it blurred. Eli kept both hands on it anyway, jaw clenched, tears sliding down his cheeks without sound, because the voice behind the door had started again, soft, familiar, almost right. Eli, open up, it said, using the exact tired tone his brother Noah used when he wanted to be let in after school. Mom and Dad said you can play in here now. But what happened next changed everything. The voice paused as if listening, and then repeated the sentence again with the same words but the wrong rhythm, like a recording being played by something that didn't understand what it meant. A few hours earlier, Eli had been downstairs trying to watch cartoons like a normal kid. The living room lamp made a warm circle on the carpet, but everything beyond it felt too big and too dark, as if the house had expanded the moment his parents left. They'd gone out to deal with paperwork, boring adult stuff they didn't explain. And they'd told Eli to stay downstairs, to leave Noah's room alone. Noah had died a few months earlier, and his door had stayed shut ever since, like the room was holding its breath. Eli tried not to look at it when he walked past the hallway. He tried not to think about the way Noah used to shout at his game, or how the whole house used to feel alive when Noah was in it. He told himself he didn't miss him because missing someone made the air feel thick. Then from upstairs came a dull thud, like a box dropping onto the floor. Eli muted the TV. The house went quiet again, except for the refrigerator hum and the soft ticking of the clock. He waited for another noise, hoping his ears had lied. A minute passed. Then he heard it. A slow, familiar squeak, the exact sound of Noah's gaming chair shifting its weight. It wasn't a random creak. It was that chair. Eli had heard it 1,000 times. He stood up without meaning to, as if the sound had hooked him and pulled him upright. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling like it belonged to someone else. Halfway up, he saw it. Noah's door wasn't fully closed. It was cracked open just enough to show a thin line of pale blue light bleeding into the hallway. Eli stopped. Noah's computer had been unplugged weeks ago. Eli knew because he'd watched his dad do it, hands shaking, jaw tight like he couldn't bear the glow of that screen in an empty room. Eli took another step and the blue light flickered as if the monitor had just woken up. He moved closer, holding his breath so he wouldn't make noise. From inside, he heard the click of a mouse. Then the soft, rapid tapping of keys, fast, impatient, unmistakably like Noah playing online late at night. Eli's throat tightened. It was impossible, but it sounded real in the way impossible things never do. He leaned toward the crack and peered through. Noah's room was lit only by the monitor glow, making everything look underwater. The posters on the wall, the piles of clothes, the desk, same as always, but wrong somehow without Noah's laughter. And in the gaming chair facing the screen was a silhouette, someone sitting with their shoulders forward the way Noah did when he got serious, head slightly tilted like he was listening to the game audio. For half a second, Eli forgot fear. Hope hit him so hard it hurt. He whispered, barely audible, "Noah?" The clicking stopped instantly. The tapping stopped. The chair stopped squeaking. The silhouette didn't vanish. It remained perfectly still, as if it had been waiting for Eli to say the name. Then the chair began to turn. It didn't turn like someone rotating on wheels with a foot pushing off the floor. It glided, smooth, too smooth, chair and shadow moving as one piece. Eli's stomach sank as the figure's shoulders came into view, because they were narrower than Noah's, and the neck seemed too long, rising from the collar like it didn't know where a human neck should end. The head angled toward the door, and Eli felt a pressure behind his eyes, like being stared at from very close range. He slammed the door shut. For a second there was silence, so complete it felt like the house had cut its breath. Eli pressed his back against the door, palms flat on the wood, trying to hold it closed with everything he had. His heart hammered so hard he thought it would give him away. Then came a soft knock from the other side. Not banging, not rage, just a polite, slow knock. 1, 2, 3. Eli didn't move. The doorknob turned gently as if someone inside was testing it, then stopped. The voice returned, closer now, right at the door, and it sounded even more like Noah, almost perfect, except the pauses were wrong, the emotion a fraction late, as if it had to remember when to sound affectionate. "Eli," it said softly, "open the door." Eli squeezed his eyes shut. He shook his head even though nobody could see. The doorknob rattled once, harder, then again. The door trembled. Eli dug his heels into the carpet and leaned his full weight against it until his shoulders ached. From inside, a new sound began, low and heavy. The gaming chair scraping the floor. Back and forth, back and forth. The scraping grew faster, angrier, like something pacing in a tight circle. Then the chair slammed into the wall with a violent thud, rattling picture frames in the hallway. Eli whimpered and bit his lip to keep from screaming. The voice changed, still trying to imitate Noah, but the patience thinning. "Mom and Dad said you can play in here now," it repeated, as if that sentence was a key that should unlock him. "They said you can play in here. Now." Each word arrived with a tiny delay, like it was being assembled. Eli felt dizzy with terror because whatever was behind that door wasn't Noah trying to comfort him. It was something that had listened to Noah, watched Noah, memorized him. Eli ran. He shot down the stairs so fast his socks slipped on the wood, nearly sending him tumbling. He grabbed the cordless phone from the kitchen counter with shaking hands and ducked behind the couch, crouched small, trying to fold himself into the shadow where the lamp couldn't reach. He called his dad and whispered so hard his throat burned. His dad answered instantly, already tense, like he'd been waiting for a call. Eli tried to explain, but the words came out broken. "Noah's room," he gasped. "Someone's in Noah's room." His dad told him to get outside. Now. Go to the neighbor's house. Stay on the line. As Eli crawled toward the front door, the sounds upstairs shifted. The scraping stopped. For a moment, the house was quiet again, quiet enough to hear the blood rushing in his ears. Then overhead came slow footsteps, heavy, deliberate, crossing the second-floor hallway. The steps paused above the stairs, as if something stood there listening. Eli didn't look up. He didn't even breathe. He unlocked the deadbolt with trembling fingers and slipped out onto the porch, the cold night air hitting his wet face like a slap. He ran across the lawn to the neighbor's porch light, banging on the door until it opened and warm hands pulled him inside. When his parents arrived with the police, they searched every room. Noah's door was closed. The computer was dark. The power strip was off. Everything looked normal, as if the house had reset itself. One officer said kids imagine things when they're grieving. Eli screamed that it wasn't imagination, that it was in there, that he heard it. The officer opened Noah's door anyway. The gaming chair faced the door, not angled toward the desk the way it should have been, but turned directly toward where Eli had been standing, perfectly centered, as if someone had positioned it to stare. Deep grooves scarred the wooden floor, long arcs carved by the chair wheels being shoved back and forth with too much force. And on the wall beside the desk, there were fresh scuff marks at shoulder height, like something had leaned there, waiting, then pushed off hard. That night, Eli slept in his parents' room with the lights on. Weeks passed. The house settled back into routine, but Noah's door stayed shut, tighter now, like the family was afraid of it. Years later, when Eli was old enough to help pack the room, he opened a dusty box from the back of Noah's closet and found Noah's old phone. It wouldn't connect to anything, but it still had videos saved. One file was labeled with the date of that night. Eli tapped it with a numb finger. The video was shaky, like it had been recorded by accident, the camera angled toward Noah's desk and chair. The room looked empty. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the gaming chair, on its own, began to turn, slow, smooth, perfectly controlled, until it faced the camera. It stopped as if it knew it was being watched. The screen glitch stuttered for a split second, and in that flicker, something tall and thin appeared seated in the chair, head tilted too far, shoulders wrong, like a poor imitation wearing a brother's shape. Then the video ended. Eli never opened the file again. He didn't need to. He'd already heard the voice. And some nights, when he's half asleep in a quiet house, he swears he can still hear that chair upstairs squeaking once softly, like it's turning toward the door and waiting for someone to say the right name. Story 4. Footsteps in the split-level house. The corded phone was slick in Harper's hand, her palm sweaty, her fingers numb, and she had to keep wiping her face on her sleeve so her tears wouldn't drip onto the keypad and make noise. She was crouched in the basement, wedged behind the stairs where the shadows were thickest, whispering into the receiver while the operator on the other end kept asking her to repeat herself. "I'm home alone," Harper breathed. "I heard someone come in." The operator told her to stay quiet and asked if the intruder was still inside. Harper opened her mouth to answer, then the operator suddenly stopped mid-sentence and said, slow and confused, "Ma'am, is someone else on the line with us?" Harper's stomach dropped. She listened, and in the space between her own ragged breaths she heard it too. A second breathing pattern, calmer, closer to the mouthpiece, like someone had picked up another phone in the house and was holding it to their face without speaking. But what happened next changed everything. The breathing became a soft, deliberate exhale, and a third sound slipped into the call. A faint whisper that said her name, perfectly, right before the line went dead. Less than an hour earlier, Harper had been annoyed, not scared. Her parents were at a wedding reception across town and promised they'd be back before she fell asleep. The split-level house felt normal when you were awake and the lights were on. Entryway at the front door, half stairs up to the living room and kitchen, half stairs down to the basement with boxes and old furniture. Harper had a blanket, a bowl of cereal, and the TV low because she didn't want the neighbors to think she was a little kid afraid of the quiet. At 9:40 p.m., she heard the front door unlock. It was the most ordinary sound in the world, metal turning, the soft pop of a latch. And it made her relax instantly. "Mom?" she called from the living room, expecting a quick answer, a laugh, maybe an apology for being late. No one answered. Harper frowned and leaned over the top stair to look down at the landing. The front door was closed. The deadbolt, she stared at it hard to be sure, was still in the locked position. She blinked because she knew what she heard. The house didn't unlock itself. Then she heard something else. slow footsteps on the basement stairs, heavy enough that she could feel the vibration through the wood. Harper didn't move. She didn't even breathe for a second. The footsteps continued, one step at a time, like whoever was coming down wanted her to count them. Then the basement light turned on. The switch was at the bottom of the stairs. You couldn't reach it from the top. Harper's throat tightened. She waited for the footsteps to come back up. They didn't. Instead, she heard the sound of someone crossing the basement floor. Slow, deliberate pacing, moving to a spot directly under where she stood at the top of the half-stairs. Then it stopped. Harper told herself it was her imagination. Maybe the furnace clicked on. Maybe a pipe knocked. Maybe a neighbor slammed a door and it echoed weird. She forced herself to sit back on the couch, but she kept her eyes on the stairwell like it might blink first. A minute later, the footsteps returned, except now they were upstairs. Not in the basement. Above her, in the hallway leading to her bedroom. That was impossible. There was only one stairway. There was no way to go from the basement to the upstairs hall without passing through the landing where she could see the door. But the steps were unmistakably there, a slow heel-to-toe walk, moving across the second level, pausing like someone was turning their head to listen. Harper stood up, shaking, and her eyes drifted to the glass storm door in the kitchen that reflected part of the room behind her. In that reflection, she saw movement, a tall figure, dark and stretched by the glass, walking through the kitchen behind her as if it belonged there. Harper spun around. Nothing. She turned back to the reflection. The figure was still there, only in the glass. Paused by the refrigerator, head tilted slightly like it was hearing her heartbeat. Then with a slow certainty it continued down the hallway toward her bedroom. Harper stared, mind blank with panic because her phone was upstairs in that hallway, plugged into her charger beside her bed. The same hallway the reflection figure just walked down. She backed away from the kitchen, every instinct screaming not to follow it, not to go where it wanted her to go. The upstairs hallway creaked once, quiet but close. Then came the soft sound of a bedroom door opening, a long wooden groan that felt like it scraped along Harper's nerves. A second later, she heard something that made her blood go cold. The bed springs in her room compressing, the exact sound of weight sitting down. Not a thump, not a drop. A careful sit like someone settling in to wait. Harper's legs went weak. Her mind raced through every horror movie warning she'd ever ignored. Don't go upstairs, don't check, don't call out. She forced herself to move, but instead of going toward the phone, she went down. She stepped quietly onto the stairs leading to the basement, keeping her eyes on the entryway as if the front door might open again without moving. The basement air was colder, smelling faintly of dust and concrete. As soon as her foot touched the basement floor, she heard footsteps overhead, directly above her, matching her pace. She stopped. The footsteps stopped. She took one step. One step answered above her. It wasn't just sound. It was synchronized, like whatever it was knew where she was without seeing her. Harper slid behind the stair supports and found the old corded phone mounted on a wooden beam, the kind nobody used anymore. She lifted the receiver with shaking hands and dialed 911, whispering so softly she could barely hear herself. When the operator answered, Harper tried to explain through sobs. The operator asked for her address. Harper gave it. The operator asked if she could see the intruder. Harper said no. Then the operator asked the question that turned Harper's fear into something worse. Is someone else on the line with us? Harper listened. The basement was silent except for her breath. Over the phone line, behind the operator's voice, there was a faint click like another extension had been lifted. Then that calm, slow breathing again, so close it sounded like lips near plastic. Harper's eyes darted around the basement, expecting to see someone in the shadows. She saw only stacked boxes and the outline of the water heater. The operator said, Stay where you are. Harper whispered, I am. Then without warning, the breathing stopped, and a whisper threaded through the call, soft, intimate, unmistakable. Harper. The line cut out immediately after, as if someone had pressed the end button with a deliberate fingertip. Harper didn't scream. She couldn't. She sat there, shaking, staring at the dead receiver, feeling like the house had swallowed her whole. Minutes later, headlights flooded the basement window well. Police cars in the driveway, her parents' car pulling in fast, tires crunching gravel. Harper crawled out from under the stairs and ran up into the entryway just as her mother burst through the front door crying her name. Police swept the house with flashlights, opening closets, checking behind doors, searching the basement corners Harper hadn't dared to look at. They found nothing. Every window was locked, the front door was still bolted, no broken glass, no forced entry. One officer, trying to sound reassuring, said sometimes kids hear things and panic when they're alone. Harper started to protest, then stopped, because part of her wanted to believe that too. Then her dad pulled up the doorbell camera footage. The video showed the entryway clearly. The front door never opened, not once. No one walked in. No one left. Harper watched herself appear in frame briefly, leaning over the top stair like a frightened ghost of herself, then stepping back out of view. The rest of the footage was empty, but her mom replayed it again, slower, pausing on the reflection in the storm door glass at the exact time Harper said she saw someone in the kitchen. In the warped reflection, for less than a second, a darker shape moved, taller than the doorframe should allow, sliding upward along the stairs without the door ever unlocking. It wasn't a clear figure, it was worse. It was just enough to make Harper's memory feel real. Later, when the police reviewed the 911 logs, the operator mentioned the strange second-line pickup. Harper's parents requested the recording. They listened to it in the kitchen with Harper sitting between them, wrapped in a blanket, staring at her hands. The audio captured Harper's whispering. It captured the operator, and when the operator said, "Is someone else on the line?" there was that faint click, that calm breathing, and a soft voice that said Harper right before the call died, quiet but unmistakable when the volume was turned up. After that night, Harper refused to sleep upstairs. She dragged a sleeping bag into the basement and told her parents she felt safer below, where she could see every corner. They argued, they begged, they tried to reason with her. Harper only shook her head and stared at the stairwell like it might open its mouth again. Because in her mind, the worst part wasn't the footsteps or the reflection or the dead call. The worst part was the certainty in that whisper, like whatever had been in her house didn't just know her name, and it wanted her to know it knew. Story 5. The Knock Under My Bed. The whisper came from beneath Jonah's head, so close it seemed to travel up through the mattress springs and into his teeth, and it spoke with a flat certainty that made his whole body lock up. "Don't get off the bed," it said. Jonah's eyes were wide in the dark, staring at the faint glow of his nightlight, while the wooden frame beneath him trembled with a slow, angry rhythm, like knuckles striking from underneath. But what happened next changed everything. The knocks answered his heartbeat, 3 thuds, a pause, then 3 more, like whatever was down there could feel him trying not to breathe. Earlier that evening, being home alone had felt like a small adventure. Jonah was 8 and his parents worked late, the kind of late that turned dinner into cereal and bedtime into just stay in your room. His cousin Renee had moved out weeks ago, but Jonah still slept in the same bedroom they used to share, surrounded by the leftover quiet of someone who'd stopped existing in that space. At 8 o'clock, the neighbor had checked in, asked if he'd locked the door, ruffled his hair, and left him with the porch light on like that was enough to keep the dark out. Jonah brushed his teeth, climbed into bed, and told himself he was brave because he didn't run down the hallway turning every light on. He turned off the lamp, left the nightlight, and listened to the house settle into silence. At 10:03 p.m., he heard 3 knocks from under the bed. Not from the wall, not from the door, not from the floor, somewhere across the room. Directly beneath his mattress, centered under his ribs like the sound had a target. Jonah froze, then let out a small nervous laugh, because kids laugh when they want to make fear disappear. "Renee," he whispered automatically, the name slipping out of habit because his brain still expected her to answer from somewhere in the room. There was a pause, long enough for Jonah to hope it was nothing. Then 3 knocks returned, exactly the same tempo, deliberate and controlled. Jonah sat up slowly, clutching the blanket to his chest. He leaned over the side of the bed and stared at the darkness underneath, where toys and dust should have been. He couldn't see anything. The nightlight barely reached that far. Still, something about the knocks felt patient, like it was waiting for him to understand. Jonah swallowed and tried something stupid, something that made sense to a child. He knocked back, 3 taps on the wooden bed frame with his knuckles. He held his breath. 3 knocks answered instantly from below, harder this time, strong enough to vibrate the mattress springs. A cold wave rolled through Jonah's stomach. He told himself it had to be a prank. Maybe Renee was back, maybe she was hiding, maybe someone was in the house playing a joke. He slid off the bed to his knees and reached down to feel under it. The air was cooler there, stale and dusty, and his fingertips brushed nothing but the smooth edge of the wooden platform. He crawled farther, face close to the floor, squinting, searching for anything that could explain the sound. Then his brain finally caught up to reality. There was no space under this bed. It wasn't a frame on legs. It was a solid platform that sat almost flush to the floor. And beneath the floor was concrete. No crawl space, no basement, nowhere a person could be. That's when the knocking changed. It stopped copying him and started sending patterns, long, short, short, long, short, short. The rhythm was too intentional to be house noise, too consistent to be pipes. Jonah backed away on his knees, scrambling up onto the mattress like it was suddenly an island. The knocks grew louder, closer, as if whatever was beneath the platform was striking upward with more force, trying to convince him it could get through. The whole bed shivered. Jonah covered his ears, but the sound traveled through his bones, making his teeth click together. Then abruptly the knocking stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. Jonah's chest heaved. He lowered his hands slowly and listened so hard his ears rang. No footsteps, no creaks, no TV. Nothing but his own breath and the faint electrical buzz of the nightlight. And then the whisper came, right under his pillow, right under the spot where his head had been moments ago. "Don't get off the bed." Jonah didn't move. He didn't cry out. He couldn't. Terror pinned him down like a heavy hand across his shoulders. He lay flat, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the knocking to start again, waiting for something to grab the edge of the blanket and pull. Minutes passed, maybe hours. His body shook until it hurt, until exhaustion finally dragged him under in short, broken pieces of sleep. When his parents came home after midnight, they found him curled in an unnatural knot at the center of the mattress, sweating through his pajamas, eyes glassy like he'd been sick. Jonah tried to explain, the words tumbling out too fast. The knocks, the patterns, the voice. His dad knelt and checked under the bed immediately, lifting the blanket, peering into the darkness like he expected a raccoon or a prank toy. There was nothing. His mom insisted they pull the mattress up. They did. The platform beneath was solid, clean, uninterrupted wood. No loose boards, no hollow spaces, no vents, no hidden compartments. His dad knocked on it to prove a point, sharp, hollow taps that sounded nothing like the deep, heavy thuds Jonah had felt in his bones. Jonah didn't argue. He just stared at the platform as if it had betrayed him. In the weeks that followed, his parents told themselves it was a nightmare, that he'd half-dreamed it, that kids' brains do strange things when they're alone too long. Jonah stopped bringing it up. He stopped asking to sleep with the lights on. He stopped calling for his parents at night because he didn't want to sound like a baby. He acted normal so they would stop watching him like he was fragile. Then one night, Jonah's mom woke up to hear him talking. Not loud, soft, careful whispers coming from his room like he was telling secrets. She got up quietly, walked to his door and cracked it open just enough to see. The nightlight painted Jonah in pale yellow. He was lying on his stomach, face pressed into the mattress, whispering into the fabric like it was an ear. His voice trembled, obedient and terrified at the same time. "Okay," Jonah whispered. "Okay. I won't tell them. Just don't pull me down." His mom pushed the door open, heart hammering, and Jonah snapped his head up so fast it looked like it hurt. His eyes were wide and wet, but his mouth clamped shut like he'd bitten through the inside of it. She asked who he was talking to. Jonah shook his head once, hard, refusing. He crawled backward until his shoulders hit the wall, clutching the blanket like armor, staring at the mattress as if it might answer for him. From that night on, Jonah never slept with any part of his body hanging off the bed. Not an arm, not a foot, not even the edge of his blanket. He kept everything tucked in tight, as if the smallest opening would be an invitation. Years later, he would move into his own place and refuse to buy a standard bed frame. When people asked why, he wouldn't tell them about the whisper or the patterns or the way the knocks had felt intelligent. He would only say, in a voice that tried to sound casual but never quite did, that he preferred sleeping low to the ground because there's nothing under a futon that can knock back.